When we imagine the Middle Ages, we often picture groaning banquet tables in candlelit halls, trenchers piled high, with roasted meats and fragrant stews. But those images belonged to rare moments of abundance, and mostly to the wealthy. For ordinary people, especially during a famine, food was not a spectacle. It was a daily gamble. In years when harvests failed, what people ate could mean the difference between survival and death. In medieval Europe, famine was never far away. Agriculture depended almost entirely on weather. A cold spring, relentless rain, early frost, or summer drought could devastate crops. Without modern storage, transportation, or international trade networks, one failed harvest might ripple through an entire region. The medieval calendar revolved around planting and reaping, and when the harvest failed, anxiety settled over villages like a fog that did not lift. Bread was the foundation of the medieval diet. In good years, peasants ate coarse bread made from rye, barley, oats, or maslin, a mixture of grains. Wheat bread, lighter and finer, was reserved for the wealthy. But in famine years, even coarse bread became scarce. Grain stores dwindled quickly. Bakers stretched flour with whatever they could find. Bran, normally sifted out, was added back in. Ground peas and beans were mixed into dough. Eventually, even these substitutes ran out. When flour ran low, people turned to famine bread. This was not bread as we know it. It was a desperate mixture of crushed acorns, ground bark, dried grass, nettles, or even powdered roots. Acorns had to be leached repeatedly in water to remove their bitterness. Tree bark, usually from elm or pine, was dried, ground, and mixed with scraps of flour. The result was heavy, bitter, and barely nourishing. Yet it filled the stomach, and that mattered more than taste. Pottage, the great equalizer of medieval cuisine, also changed in times of scarcity. In normal years, pottage was a thick stew simmered in a pot over the hearth, made from grains, vegetables, and perhaps a little meat or fat if available. During famine, it became thinner and thinner. Grain gave way to wild greens. Cabbage leaves, onion tops, leeks, and turnips were stretched to their limits. The pot might contain more water than food. Still, families gathered around it, dipping crusts of whatever bread remained. Foraging became essential. Forests, hedgerows, and fields turned into pantries of last resort. People gathered nettles, dandelion greens, sorrel, wild garlic, chickweed, and plantain. These plants provided vitamins that helped stave off disease, though medieval people did not understand nutrition in modern terms. They knew only that certain greens kept sickness at bay and quieted hunger pangs. Roots and tubers were dug from the earth. Wild carrots, parsnips, burdock roots, and even lily bulbs were eaten. In some regions, people searched for watercress in streams. Others stripped fields of leftover gleanings, missed grains and fallen ears of wheat, though this was often tightly regulated by landowners. Gleaning could mean survival for the poorest families. Livestock presented a cruel dilemma. Animals were wealth. A cow provided milk. A pig could be fattened for slaughter. Chickens laid eggs. But during famine, feeding animals became difficult. Fodder ran out. Some families slaughtered animals early, consuming meat fresh or preserving what they could with salt if salt was available. This provided a short burst of protein, but eliminated future supplies of milk or eggs. It was a gamble born of desperation. Meat itself was rare for peasants even in good times. During famine, it nearly vanished. Hunting was often restricted by law, forests belonged to nobles, and poaching could result in severe punishment. Yet hunger pushed people to risk it. Rabbits, birds, and even hedgehogs might be trapped or snared. Fish from rivers and ponds offered another lifeline, though overfishing quickly depleted stocks near populated areas. In coastal regions, shellfish and seaweed were gathered. Mussels, cockles, and limpets were easy to collect at low tide. Seaweed could be dried and added to soups. In Ireland and parts of Scotland, edible seaweeds became especially important during lean years. Along rivers, people caught eels, a valuable and nutritious food that thrived in medieval waterways. As famine deepened, people consumed foods they would normally avoid. Horses, rarely eaten in many parts of Europe due to cultural taboos, might be slaughtered. Dogs and cats, companions and pest controllers sometimes disappeared from villages. Chroniclers wrote with horror about such acts, but hunger reshapes morality. Grain substitutes extended beyond bark and acorns. Chestnuts were crucial in parts of southern Europe. In regions like Italy and France, chestnut flour became a staple when wheat failed. Legumes, peas, beans, and lentils were also vital. They stored better than many foods and provided protein. However, if famine lasted more than a season, even these reserves ran out. Religious fasting rules sometimes blurred during famine. The church prescribed numerous fast days when meat and animal products were forbidden. But in times of extreme scarcity, survival overrode regulation. Some clergy offered dispensations. Monasteries, often better stocked than villages, distributed alms and food to the poor when they could. Monastic gardens and fish ponds became important sources of relief. One of the most devastating famines in European history, the Great Famine of 1315-1317, followed years of relentless rain. Crops rotted in fields, grain prices soared beyond reach. Chroniclers describe people eating cats, dogs, and worse. Malnutrition weakened immune systems, leading to disease outbreaks. Mortality rose sharply. The famine reshaped demographics and left psychological scars long before the Black Death arrived a generation later. Malnutrition during famine had visible signs. Swollen bellies, thin limbs, brittle hair. Children suffered most. Without adequate protein and calories, growth faltered. Adults weakened, unable to work fields effectively, creating a vicious cycle. A hungry farmer could not produce a strong harvest, even when conditions improved. Communities developed coping strategies. Some migrated in search of food, becoming wandering beggars. Others relied on charity from wealthier neighbours. Urban centres sometimes imposed price controls on grain, though enforcement varied. Grain merchants were both necessary and resented, accused of hoarding or profiteering. In better years, preservation techniques, salting, drying, smoking, pickling, created buffers against scarcity. But these stores depended on surplus. A string of bad harvests erased safety nets. Salt itself was expensive and not always available in sufficient quantities. Without preservation, food spoiled quickly. Alcohol, surprisingly, played a role in survival. Ale was safer to drink than contaminated water and provided calories. Even during famine, small amounts of ale might be brewed from inferior grain. However, as supplies dwindled, brewing declined. Water sources became more important, increasing disease risk. In Mediterranean regions, olives and olive oil offered calories and fat. Grapes could be dried into raisins. In Northern Europe, butter and cheese were valuable but perishable. When cows produced less milk due to poor grazing, dairy supplies shrank dramatically. The psychological experience of famine cannot be separated from the food itself. Hunger sharpens the senses. The smell of baking bread from a lord's manor could feel like torture. Rumours of hidden stores sparked unrest. Food theft increased. Social bonds strained under pressure. Yet famine also revealed resilience. People shared when they could. Communal ovens baked whatever mixtures families managed to create. Knowledge of edible plants passed from elders to children. Women, often responsible for food preparation, became experts in stretching meagre ingredients into sustaining meals. When harvests finally improved, diets recovered slowly. Seed grain had to be reserved for planting. Livestock herds needed rebuilding. Trust in stability remained fragile. The memory of famine lingered in proverbs and prayers. Medieval people understood deeply that abundance was temporary. Looking back, what people ate during a medieval famine tells a story of adaptation. It was a cuisine of necessity: bark bread, nettle soup, roasted acorns, thin pottage, trapped rabbits, foraged greens. It was not glamorous, nor was it consistent across regions. Climate, geography, and local customs shaped responses. Above all, famine food reflects the precariousness of medieval life. Without modern infrastructure, a community's survival rested on weather patterns and stored grain. Every crust of bread carried the weight of uncertainty. In times of scarcity, the boundary between food and non-food blurred, and survival demanded creativity that was both resourceful and heartbreaking. The medieval table in famine years was sparse, often bitter, and sometimes shocking to modern sensibilities. Yet within that scarcity lay ingenuity. People turned forests into bakeries, fields into pharmacies, and rivers into lifelines. They endured season after season, sustained not just by what little they could eat, but by the determination to see another harvest.